Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC. It is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Tuesday night, as Mikal Bridges makes his return to Brooklyn right across the river. One of the oddest return games that you'll ever see. Obviously, we had earlier in the season when Karl-Anthony Towns made his return to Minnesota, and he actually had to get on a plane to make said return. And the other oddity about this is the trade we thought would never happen forever, that the Knicks and Nets would never make a trade, because guess what? They hadn't made one since the first Reagan administration actually happened this offseason. And thankfully, Mikal Bridges is coming off a good game in the up and down season that he's had this year. But it's time to preview a game against the Brooklyn Nets. And joining me to talk about this matchup against the Brooklyn Nets from Nets Daily and one half of the Brooklyn podcast, Collin Helwig. Collin, welcome to Knicks Film School, sir.
Thanks, buddy. Happy to be here. I've been, following the Nets for a long time. There's been a lot more years that have been a lot more exciting than this one, but, we're all doing our best here. I think everyone going to the games, whether they're a Nets fan or they're a Knicks fan from across the river, or if they're just someone who wants to score a good ticket for a cheap basketball game, they kind of know what's going on here. The front office has kind of leaked that out a little bit recently, but, we're all having fun with it. So thank you for inviting me on. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about the experience that you just went over right now, the going to the games. Some at Knicks Film School, maybe we have made jokes about how few people may be going to the games. I don't know who that could potentially have been in the past. I wouldn't know who's ever joked about the Nets crowd size at Knicks Film School. They should be reprimanded if they ever have. But let's just say there will be more Knicks fans than Nets fans in the building on Tuesday night. Just hypothetically, there will be. The fact that this year doesn't have the same weight or the expectations of the last few years, that I don't want to throw the T word around there, but it seems like they really are in the capture the flag mode, I should say. Does it matter to you at all that this will most likely be a Knicks home game in Brooklyn, especially with the Mikal Bridges of it all? Does that matter to you?
No, and I don't think it should for Nets fans. I think, anyone who can take their Knicks goggles off or their Nets goggles off and understands that if I want to go to a basketball game and the economy is not great right now, and I can do it at MSG, or I can do it at Knicks, or I can go across the river and pay $100 less, maybe $150 less. If you're a Knicks fan and you want to take your kid to a game, that totally makes sense. We're all wallet conscious here, so it's totally valid. This is what happens when you bring a team to an area that has been dominated by another team for 80 years. How long have the Knicks been in New York? Since like the dawn of forever. So
forever. Played the first NBA game. So yeah.
I think it's something that everyone makes a little bit bigger deal out of it than it is, truthfully. But I mean, it is what it is. I think Nets fans expect it. It's not it's a bit of a lazy joke, I might say at this point, but feel free to make it. You're making noise, go for it.
Who would ever make such a lazy joke? I don't know who would say such a thing. I do actually. This takes me back to my teenage years, like when I first got a job. Because to your point about the ticket prices at the Garden, which have only gone up since then, it was cheaper for me and my buddies to like take one of our parents' minivans and like make the trip to Jersey and go to the Izod Center. I guess it was at one point, not Prudential, because Prudential's the one in Newark.
They were in Prudential for 2 years, I think.
Okay. But that was the Newark arena, right?
What's that?
So whatever it was called before Izod Center is what I'm saying. Like we used to go out there if LeBron was in
Newark,
town, or if the Lakers were in town, and your chance to see Kobe or your chance to see Shaq, D Wade in town, was take the trip to Jersey and then go see him that way. So I do hear that, and I guess we'll see what it's like on Tuesday night. The fact that the Nets are where they are this season, sitting at 14-29, the first two games of the season were actually very competitive and required a Jalen Brunson go-ahead shot and a Mikal Bridges block at the end of the game. And just, it seemed as if, from my vantage point, all right, they're not going to be good this year, but this is at least like the culture setting tone from, like, you got the coach. It seems like there's clearly some good principles being instilled. And then 5 games later started a stretch where obviously they made the trade of Dennis Schroeder, but then they're 5-19 in their last 24 games. And the accelerated path to, getting as many lottery balls as possible was put in place. If I ask like the vibe in Brooklyn amongst Nets fans, is it like the losses are starting to pile up and this is getting frustrated, or is there still that good feeling that you had or that you can hold on to from that 9-10 start that will carry you through what will probably be a 55 loss season?
Yeah, I think, if you were to ask me that question a couple of weeks ago, I would have said it's a little bit more split because we were closer to some of those miraculous wins that they pulled off. They beat the Warriors before the Warriors started to tail end. I guess maybe the Nets were part of that tail end, but that's another story. But there was a lot of angst in the fan base between people who understand that probably the closest path to a championship is to bottom out and get a stud this year, next year, X amount of years, go from there. But at the end of the day, there's the other side that says, hey, I'm a basketball fan. The core of being a basketball fan is to watch your team and root for your team to win. So there was kind of a little of a battle there. But, when you have a 59-point loss, that kind of tends to shut up the side that says, oh, no, let's keep fighting. Let's play to win no matter what. Even though we understand the limitations of our roster, even though we understand our front office has 100% put us in a pro-tanking position, you still kind of push for it. But, this stretch, I think, has very much quieted that crowd. But I would still say that the vibes are good. This time last year, the Nets were trying to win and were losing just as much. At least now you have this bright future you can look towards. So it's never going to say it's great. It was a great week when they lost by their most points ever in a game. But in terms of the big picture, there's been a lot stickier situations. This team especially has been, and especially in the Brooklyn tenure, if you want to look back at the Billy King days.
Well, so yeah, the 12-70 season. And look, that's the weirdest thing about that year is, well, how do you feel in hindsight that they don't take DeMarcus Cousins, and that seemed like it ended up being a one-player draft? It was John Wall 1, and they don't get him, and it ends up being a wash. But I guess that's why this year's so fascinating, that there's very clearly multiple players at the top of this draft. It's not like just the Wemby draft. There's going to be multiple. I'm talking to Sam Vecini, my buddy over at the Game Theory podcast. Like you get mixed reviews because he feels the need to highlight all the good of every prospect, and yet I don't know how many franchise guys will actually be at the top of the draft. But it seems like there will be a lot of good players here. So, is there at least the hope that the 9-10 start, if we end up winning 27 games and have the 5th best odds and drop to 6, there's going to be a good player at the top added to the Nets next year that we can build around?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things, Sean Marks is another figure where some Nets fans love him, some Nets fans hate him, but I think they can all agree on is that he has been a very good drafter. He drafted Jared Allen, he drafted Karis LeVert. He found all these guys without a first-round pick. Now he has a first-round pick, one that will probably be a pretty good one. So I think there's trust in there that he will find a piece, whether it's an easy decision for him and it's Cooper Flagg or Harper, at the top, or if it's, we're in the 6 or 7. I mean, obviously you want one of the big guys because, they're touted. But, I think every Nets fan at this point, when you're getting blown out every night, in the corner of your eye, you're watching Cooper Flagg highlights, you're watching Ace Bailey highlights. That's pretty exciting. These kids are studs. Being a Nets reporter, I don't have a lot of time to really watch a lot of college ball and break it down. But what I'm seeing is box office stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Cooper Flagg. I mean, the Boston College game he just had is pretty remarkable. Yeah. It's
smoke them.
It's where I can only relate to and they're honestly not comparable what the Nets are doing this year and the tanking season the Knicks had in 2019, because like everybody got fired 6 months into the following season, or even 2 months into the following season, between like Fizdale and Steve Mills. And obviously, this probably better than anybody, the Knicks made a trade of Kristaps Porzingis midway through that season because they were getting Zion and then Kevin Durant and then Kyrie Irving. And then what happened? So it's almost as if the Nets, when the Mikal Bridges trade happened, we had Evan Roberts on the program, and I said it's tough for me to talk too much smack about we got Mikal Bridges because I actually like the place that the Nets now find themselves in. They turned Kevin Durant into 9 first-round picks. They got 2 firsts back for Kyrie Irving, and they're able to now sit with a treasure trove of assets. And because of what Houston was able to do for you and giving you your pick back, you have a direction. And the Knicks back in those days were just kind of hinting at a direction that was more, prayer than anything else. So you did say that the fan base is kind of split on Marks, and the side that's frustrated with him or that's anti Marks. What do they say? Like, what's the biggest frustration with him?
I mean, they looked like we were going to see a dynasty for 5 years, and then 3 years later, it's not that at all. It's the farthest thing from it. So
did they blame him for that? Like that's the anti-Marks crowd is like they blame him for why that didn't work out.
I think so. I mean, who else do you blame than the GM when 3 Hall of Famers ask out? And I don't think it's all his fault. I think a pandemic happening right smack in the middle of when that group would have been peaking made things a lot tougher. Steve Nash was not a good hire. I definitely pin that on him. And I think that was part of the reason that, KD was the big piece. I think his frustration with Nash was him seeing him as not the most competent coach was something that, soured him over time. And so I think that based on what I'm hearing from Nets fans, I don't totally subscribe. I very much said that if you think Sean Marks is the greatest GM in the world, you're wrong. If you think he's the worst GM in the world, you're wrong. And it's a really political answer to say he's somewhere in the middle, but that's really where he is. It's a yin for every yang. You can't take the good with the bad. You can't take the good without the bad, vice versa.
Speaking of the Steve Nash hire, the fact that Atkinson is on pace for 70 wins in Cleveland. Is there any part of the Nets fan base that looks at what that was and wonders what if the Nets had just stuck with them? Like, you tell me, like, the end days of Atkinson with that Nets team, was it like time? Was that move justified to move on from him as the head coach, or should they have been more patient?
I mean, hindsight now, you can definitely say that because the guy they brought in definitely wasn't the guy. But I think at the time, the Nets were just starting to, KD wasn't even playing yet. Kyrie was playing and, Harden wasn't there yet, but they were very much, I think a lot of GMs do there's 2 different routes you go on. You go, we're going to try to build culture and, it's going to be the guys in the building first and not necessarily GM, but the coaches and stuff like that. And like kind of how the Miami Heat doing it. It's kind of kicking them in the butt right now, but we don't have to get into that. Or you do something where we are going to be players first organization to the max. And I think that when the Nets had this chance to sign these superstar players, bring these guys in, they realized that the best chance of it's particularly those 3 guys was to let them run the show. And at that point, they were doing that and there were not any problems yet. There was no pandemic yet. There was nothing that made it end up being where, Joe Tsai is tweeting, we are not going to fire our coach or we are not going to fire the GM or stuff like that. It was the beginning of the end, but no one knew that. So there was not as much angst with it. I think everyone just kind of understood Kevin Durant's probably more valuable than, not that he was requesting a trade, but it seemed like it was his idea, but he's more valuable. Kyrie Irving, keeping them happy is more important than Kenny Atkinson, who was a great coach, is a great coach now. But at that time, it was just kind of where everyone leaned. That's how I remember it, at least, though.
I appreciate you taking that trip down memory lane with you. I'm sure you're tired of talking about that era of Nets basketball, but look, no. It's obviously a new era now. And I mean, the craziest part about it is the path that Mikal Bridges, or the part that Mikal Bridges, I should say, plays in both of our futures, both Knicks and Nets fans' futures going forward. I mean, it's hard to argue or think of anybody that's mattered to both franchises equally as much, in any transaction. Like who means the most to two different franchises equally, like with the Knicks, he is either going to be the final part of a championship or he's going to be the thing that helped rebuild the Nets in a way that was pretty lucrative. What was your reaction when Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks in June? And just what was your reaction when it happened?
Yeah, no, I was pretty pumped for it, honestly, both as a reporter and someone who's tapped in with the fan base. You talked about it earlier, picking a direction. When you don't have a direction, that just leads into frustration. And like I said before, this time last year when Mikal Bridges was their guy, it was not going well. And he didn't seem like he was happy there. The team wasn't winning. The fans weren't happy. That's bad for everybody. So picking a direction and saying, all right, we're going to be probably not too hot, but getting the picks back from the Rockets was a big part of that. I don't know if I would have said Mikal was their best player last year. If it's either him or Cam Thomas. They're two very different players in terms of their ceiling and floor. So it's a tough conversation to have. But when you trade someone who is potentially your best player, your odds are you're not playing to be good next year. So it was very important to get the Houston picks back. I think that was more important than the Mikal trade itself. But getting 5, maybe 6 first rounders for a guy who hasn't been an all-star, that's kind of unprecedented. And I understand that the Knicks, they're playing to be good for a while, but no one has a crystal ball here. Just like, we can't say that the Knicks are going to be awful and those picks are going to be great. The Knicks can't say that, we're about to start some dynasty that's going to go on forever and ever. So I think I was glad when it happened, mainly for picking the direction. And, I'm happy for him too. I think who doesn't want to play with all your buddies,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the reaction we all had was like, oh my gosh, we got Mikal Bridges. And there's we've bought in as the Villanova, that angle.
Yeah. Because Devo was still there.
Well, in the moment we thought the one missing piece was Mikal Bridges to the power of friendship. And then little did we know, 2 months later, the power of friendship meant nothing because they were going to trade Devo for Karl-Anthony Towns. And that's the cost of doing business. But yeah, he's had an up and down season. Of course, I'm sure you guys have talked about what he's been in New York this year. His defense. I mean, we're recording this. I was going to say we're recording this after the Knicks played.
Who knows about tomorrow? Well, yeah.
Well, so yeah, this will air technically.
It's
yesterday.
the Nets, so probably play.
It's technically yesterday. So the weird part about the Hawks game, because we're recording this after the Knicks just beat the Hawks. He played 27 minutes. That I just don't remember the last time he wasn't playing in a close game at least 40 plus. And here we are, a 27-minute game where he played outstanding defense on Trae Young. One-on-one defense was great on switches, was great off ball as well. Just played probably his best all-around game, as well as putting in 26 points a third quarter where he just kind of took over and helped turn around a Knick deficit into a Knick lead. We've joked around that because he played 20 minutes, get prepared for 48 minutes against the Nets, because he's saving his bullets to make sure that he could give it a go against his old team. So we'll see what happens. So you mentioned the 60-point loss that just happened. They also lost to the Thunder in blowout fashion as well. There is this loss to the Lakers by 1 point, though. And I want to focus on that game because as a Knicks fan, I'm terrified of that loss, losing to the Nets by 1 or just playing a close game. So if you could tell me, I know they're again 5-19 in their last 24 games, when it's looked the best, not when it's looked like they're going to lose by 60 or get blown out by the Thunder, when it's looked the best, how does it look? What works for them when it's working?
Gotcha. So in terms of the team now, their best was when Dennis Schroeder was on the team, but he's
right
now. But since it's very much been D'Angelo Russell instead of Ben Simmons, they both played in that Laker game, but D'Angelo Russell, there's just more he can do on the offensive end. It's difficult to say because whether they're doing the T word or not, they have a lot of guys on the injury report. So guys are in and out, and Ben Simmons is one of those guys. I believe he's probable tomorrow, so I expect him to play.
Who was that again? You cut out. Who was that again?
I'm talking about Ben Simmons.
Simmons. Okay.
He's probable tomorrow, so I believe he will be playing, but the D'Angelo Russell minutes have been better from what I've seen. I wasn't. I think with Ben, you see a lot more just kind of spamming dribble handoffs because he doesn't put as much pressure on the rim as he used to. He obviously doesn't have pressure outside that as kind of as a pop guy if he's setting the screen or if he's going to come around it. Whereas D'Angelo can really do anything. I'm not saying he's the best at everything. He's not some superstar, but he can hit shots from anywhere on the floor. So I think when he's out there. And then especially the Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton minutes are really what kill you. It's just the spacing isn't there. Yeah. But unfortunately, Nick Claxton is who they paid this year. And, you're not going to not play that guy. And I think that the Nets are going to play their guys because it's a nationally televised game. It's their only nationally televised game. And Adam Silver will be a watching. And, you don't want to take out his checkbook and write him a fine. So
Gotcha. I was going to ask about the Ben Simmons, the him in a center minutes, basically the spacing that exists. And I mean, that's the offensive side of the ball, which I'll ask about in a second, but the defensive side of the ball, I'd assume they'll go because we've seen teams switch it up this way. I'd assume they'd go Claxton on Cat and have the center guard him. But if you wanted to, you could go Claxton on Josh Hart and put Ben Simmons on Cat if you'd like to. I'm curious who you think will be guarding Jalen Brunson in this game. How do you think the Nets will match up in this game? If it's okay to get into the X's and O's of it all.
No, it's definitely okay. It's a little bit because, like I said, their lineup is so incredibly fluid right now. Between some nights they want to, because they're developing is more important than winning right now. Mm-hmm. That's how I'll word it. Jalen Wilson will play more than Cam Johnson or something like that. I think right now they'll probably put, if I were to guess, I think they might even they would put Ben. They put Ben on Jalen and they'd put Claxton down low just because that,
gotcha.
Both those guys can switch, but Ben is, I guess he's still a point guard. I don't know what the hell he is these days.
He can guard 1 through 5. Like at his peak,
he's closer to a point guard than Nick Claxton, even though Claxton's a great switcher too. But it just makes more sense that way. So I think that's what they'll cue it up. With I never know. It could be Cam Johnson, it could be Zaire Williams, it could be Jalen Wilson at the guards each night. So I'm not sure who will take on Mikal and OG. That might just be a roll of dice, but. Yeah, I would say Clax stays down low. We put Ben up top.
In that Laker game, they went 7 of 38 from 3. How often does that happen? Like, how often do they just get hot from 3? Because that's what has honestly killed the Knicks this year, is a team just getting hot from 3, and they've been playing mostly this drop coverage with Cat for most of the year and conceding because they're keeping their shell intact, as Tibbs like to say. And I say all of that, by the way, after the Hawks game, in which I saw a different scheme where they were switching left and right and not overhelping, and it actually led to 25 turnovers. So who knows if that happens again, but how often do the Nets get hot from 3 is my question.
Not as often as they used to, post the Schroeder trade, post the Finney-Smith trade, stuff like that. Cam Johnson is having a career year right now, so he's a big piece of that puzzle. I expect he'll play. So I think the thing is they're always going to take a ton, no matter if Cam Johnson is playing their best shooter, or if, Toasani Wuma is like coming off the bench, like they are going to pull them. That's one of the things I'm a bit of a basketball modernist. I like the 3-point shot. I know a lot of people today seem to think it's ruining the game, but I do not feel that way. I think it's what translates to winning. And the Boston Celtics are a great example of that, as much as I think you and I probably both dislike that team. But Jordy Fernandez.
We definitely share that. Yes. Yeah.
Jordy Fernandez has said from the jump, we want to get out. We want to shoot a ton of threes. He very much buys into, that analytical, that kind of modern day basketball aspect where we're going to take a ton of threes and we'll go from there. And I want guys who can stretch the floor, and I want guys who can play on both sides of the ball. And that's how we're going to build up our rotation. And so I expect them to take a bunch. I don't know that they will be splashing them because their numbers have been skyrocketing. They started the year as one of the best 3-point teams in the league when Schroeder was playing out of his mind, and Johnson still playing out of his mind, but was back then too. It's kind of tapered off a bit since they've made those trades. I don't think they still could. We'll see. The drop is definitely going to make that possible, but there will be a lot of threes taken. I don't know that they will all go in just because of what we've seen recently.
To your point, the Nets currently sit at 9th in 3-point attempts per game this season at 39. They also sit at 9th in 3-point makes per game this season, even though they're around league average in percentage. They get up a ton each game, which, to your point, whether you're an NBA modernist or you hate the 3 existing in the sport, you have to just admit 3 is more than 2. So at a certain point, it's playing the variance game. So I respect it at least. I guess I'm curious, with the minutes you're dedicating to Ben Simmons and Claxton on the court at the same time. Although, you tell me how often he's like they've had Ben Simmons as the center. Like, did they ever pair him with 4 shooters to see how that lineup looks? Because that makes some sense to me.
Yeah, they've done it before. The thing is, they don't have a whole lot of shooters left on the team, at least like pure shooters. You know what I mean? Like you could do Russell, Wilson, Thomas. Thomas is out right now. It's like Thomas is not playing right now. Shake Milton was another guy who was playing good minutes, and he was part of the trade. Tyrese Martin, actually, who is my guy. He's from my hometown, actually. He was on a 2-way contract. The Phoenix game, he hit 8 threes. So, I try not to be a biased guy, but as a Lehigh Valley resident, I root for him, and he has been shooting the ball quite well. So maybe keep an eye out for him. He is a really good job at navigating around screens, kind of like manipulating the pressure on the defense. So he's the guy to look for, I would say. But, Ben, he's lost a lot of stuff. One thing he has not lost is the ability to find 3-point shooters, especially when he's pushing in transition. So when they do come, I would look for them to be in transition. They're half court offense, because that's when that spacing kind of bears down on you. That's when you get in trouble.
Yeah, I'm curious what his next team looks like, because just having a guy.
We all are.
Well, that's where I'm going to go with my next question, to see who's the keepers and what do you want them to do at this upcoming deadline. But I guess we'll start with Ben Simmons, because the contract and what he used to be, like former number 1 pick, rookie of the year, all defense, all NBA player in conversations. That player's probably gone, but I still can't get over the fact, and maybe it's just how much I love Josh Hart, that there's still just a value to someone that can push in transition and have his court vision. I also wonder if him as like a future backup center and just being a point center like a Hartenstein, but obviously not as good as Hartenstein at this point in his career.
It's not a bad comparison with Hartenstein's. Just
like he's obviously not going to space the floor, but like a guy that you could run your offense through as a hub, and you pair him with shooting and it ends up working out. I mean, you tell me. I know for years it was just whatever you could get for him will be a positive. What do you expect the return to be for Ben Simmons if he's a target at the deadline?
The thing about the Nets and what makes their rebuild so promising, and something that they seem to be very conscious of too, is all the cap space they're going to have next year. And that's because Ben Simmons' contract is expiring. So to trade him would be, and now he's getting paid around $40 million. So you're going to have to take back some contracts, because they don't want to cut into that. And also in doing that, they don't want to take back Ben Simmons is expiring after this year. So to get something that matches that, you're going to probably need 3, maybe 4 contracts. You think you can find 4 expiring contracts on a team that's going to be willing to also take on Ben Simmons? That's a lot of kind of boxes you have to check. So I really don't expect them to move him. I think they ride out with him this year. And I also think he's the kind of guy where, at the end of the day, he's not what he used to be. But part of being a good GM, a good owner, when you're doing a tanking season, is still kind of giving a reason for people to come into your arena. And for Ben Simmons, for who he is the name, and especially with international basketball, is one of those. So I don't see him getting shipped out. I do think I don't expect the Nets to bring him back next year. I think they will call it quits after that. I don't have any sources there, but it's just kind of a hunch I have. And, wherever he goes next, I have no idea where it could be. I think no matter who you are, if you were once an all-star and then it goes downhill from there, you're at least going to get a vet minimum. Some team will take you on a flyer. That could be anyone, but I don't expect him to be dealt.
So it sounds like what they're going to get back for Ben Simmons is cap space. Like that. Bingo. That's which would you rule out a buyout if he or his agent goes to Marks and says, like, we'd like to be on a good team the rest of the year? Or do you think he's like happy just to get minutes to showcase for a team next year?
I think it's very much the latter, because he's this is the most healthiest he's been in a very, very long time. He's not his old self, but he's serviceable on the right team. So I think this is the perfect situation for him right now. And I think for like the things I said before, like the Nets have one of the largest worldwide fan bases. I don't know if people are flying into Brooklyn when, we're in like a polar vortex right now. It's freezing cold outside. I don't know how many people are coming here from Australia, but that's something that, it's something, it's a green flag that, there's some reason to hang on to him when I'm finished out the year.
Yeah, took the wife out for dinner after the Knicks game before our conversation tonight. And I actually had to make a trip back into our apartment to get another coat because of how cold it is.
It's bad.
Yeah. Whether you're in Queens or in different parts of the country, at least the Northeast, I should say, you're feeling it. Who else is gone? I mean, Cam Johnson's the big one. And if you had to pick a team that probably pulls the trigger on trading for him, who do you think it'll be? And what do you think the return will be?
Yeah, I think the Nets are going to make sure that 1 first-round pick unprotected is kind of the starter. I think what's realistic, they're going to try to get 2. I think what's realistic is maybe you get 1 and then you get a second and it's like top like 8 protected. I think there will be some kind of protection on that. I think the Nets will try to get 2 unprotected. And the goal will be, again, to take back salaries that are expiring, or at least in 1 year, or that will not clog up the cap space. But I think if they can get 2 first-round picks, they'll ship them out and they'll deal with whatever the cap ramifications are. I know the Cavs are a team to watch. The Grizzlies are a team to watch. My bet would be having, at this point, not really knowing, I would guess the Grizzlies, because I do know that the Nets and Grizzlies had conversations about Dorian Finney-Smith. So, he is a player option, which he'll likely opt out. So that's kind of an expiring. So that takes some value down, but it's still two guys who are veteran, 3D guys who can hit the three ball, cover a lot of positions. I assume, they'll be able to kind of pick up those conversations easily. So that would be my best guess. But he's also got, I think, 2 more years on his contract. The Nets don't quite have to trade him, although they've made a lot of moves that make it seem, again, I'm not going to say the T word, prioritize young development over winning. Trading Dennis Schroeder literally hours after he became trade eligible shocked me, because I knew that the Nets, they're prioritizing this year's draft. I did not think they would be so gung-ho when they did it there. So I think that remains their objective, and they will field offers for sure.
The other names I have are, I guess, wild cards to me, because I'm curious just how available they are. You tell me. Noah Clowney, Zaire Williams, like the other. D'Angelo Russell. Like, who else is available? Do you think at this deadline?
Yeah, I think everyone available outside. I actually think Clowney is the least likely guy to get traded, because he was like 19 when they drafted him. Him and Dariq Whitehead were the two youngest first round picks in last year's draft. So they're still now Dariq he had shin surgery, so he's still coming all the way back from that. He's over in Long Island, but Clowney's playing for the Nets right now. Still one of the youngest players in the league. He fits the mold of what I think Sean Marks and Jordy Fernandez wants to build. He's a very similar player. Lazy comparison because they were just teammates, but very similar player to Dorian Finney-Smith, where he can play a lot of different positions. He's a great shooter. He loves shooting the three. He is the epitome of the tall guy whose favorite shot is to just shoot the triple over and over and over again. So he makes sense for the modern NBA team. He's super young. I think if you were to bet on some guy that they would hold on to, he would be one of those. Thomas is probably the guy who's going to bring people in the most. I don't think anyone really knows what's going to. He's a restricted free agent after this year. I think that's kind of awesome, because we're going to let the league tell us how much he is worth, and then we can match that. But there were some trade rumors about him earlier, and I don't expect him to get dealt, because I think the Nets want him for that value standpoint, and also the hedge that maybe he could be a future star when the Nets are ready to compete again. But other than that, everyone else is on the table. This is a team that has made their intentions of prioritizing the development over winning now clearer and clearer with each passing day. I think if they're going to be open for shop, if they get the right call, they'll punch it for sure.
As it currently stands, the Nets would have 4 first-round picks in the upcoming NBA draft, one in the top 6 or 7. Obviously, they have the Milwaukee pick that, I was staring at that thing for years when the Knicks had it. Like, That's going to be a path to, because I had no idea how good Milwaukee would be at this point. And Milwaukee's turned it around a little bit to where it's in the 20s again. But obviously they've got so what is it? The Rockets swap this year, or is it the Rockets pick overall this year?
Dude, there are so many bylaws with that pick to the point where I've just told myself I'm going to let the season end and then I'll decide where it is. I think
then you look up Tankathon and it's like where it says that's where they pick.
If the Rockets are the better team, which they have been for a couple months now, they get the Rockets pick. So I think it's the least favorable no matter how it falls, I think.
Gotcha. But that's where, to your point about Marks, is where he's really going to have to earn his salary this offseason. Like you made the correct move for Mikal Bridges and setting him to the Knicks. You're in the rebuild season. Now let's see what you do with 4 first-round picks, and we'll see what happens. Last thing before you get out of here, Mikal Bridges, I'm sure, does mean something to Nets fans, and I'm actually curious how much the Nets being at times unwatchable potentially forces Nets fans to watch the Knicks and maybe root against with extra emphasis what's going on in New York. What has your impression been of the Knicks this year, what they're doing as far as how Mikal Bridges has performed, and what do you think about their prospects this season?
Yeah, I do want to go back on I actually don't think that Nets fans, now in terms of what you said earlier, they're definitely attached to Mikal Bridges. Their future is kind of like that's an important part of it. You can't tell the story of the Nets especially since in their Brooklyn tenor without Mikal Bridges for sure. In terms of fan attachment, I really don't think there's a whole lot there. I think he was kind of an elevator between Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and that was the tough breakup. And Mikal Bridges was a nice little rebound for a little while, something to distract yourself, that 20-game stretch he had when he first came there. But the season after that was not good, and I think there's a lot of bad memories, and I don't think that Nets fans have that much remorse for him. I think he's just kind of like a guy who was here for a little while, and it's send you on your way. You know what I mean? But in terms of the Knicks, I like where they're at in terms of the East right now. I think being in the East definitely helps their favor. And if there's any, I saw there were rumors about they should just make the playoff, like there's no conferences anymore. The Knicks should absolutely be hammering to vote against that, because
a little bit.
The West is just a wagon. But I think there's always going to be that they pick the right time, especially in terms of the conference competition, to absolutely go for it. So I think they're going to be right there with the Cavs swinging at the Celtics this year. The only thing that I live with 4 Knicks fans, so I have this conversation with them a lot. And you look at a lot of teams, they'll make big swings for trades for players like Karl-Anthony Towns or whoever. And oftentimes it takes a whole year to reassess your cap situation, to have, the new CBA is still taking everyone to kind of fit. The Knicks actually seem to be, with the way they were able to keep, Deuce or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So shout out to the ability to sign and trade. Shout out Brock Aller,
They seem to have a good grip on it, which is good. But when you take a big swing, it oftentimes takes a year, whether it's recuperating money, whether it's finding out how the lineups work from a coaching standpoint, to kind of figure out all those little cogs that need to come together at the end to win a championship. So that's why I don't think it's going to happen this year, but that should not be, that's totally okay, because, they're set up. They got the power of friendship. Those are all things that are going to last and matter next year and the year after that. So they're absolutely in a good position.
Yeah, I've drawn a lot of comparisons to the Cavs when they went all in from Mitchell. Like I remember that first playoff series when the Knicks played the Cavs, and previewing it, like I picked the Knicks to win that series, and I didn't think they'd win in 5 though. And I kept coming back to the fact that the Knicks had all this depth with like a solid bench, and they went 9 deep, and I was happy with that. And while the Cavs probably had the 2 best players in the series, although Jalen Brunson became what he became, I kept going back to I like their top 4, and then the next 7 are all Knicks before I get to a 5th Cav that I like. And I think the Knicks, at least I like their top 6, but they're probably going to have to go through a couple of transaction cycles. And so even if that first Cavs year ended in 51 wins and a first round loss, hopefully that's not what happens with the Knicks this year. It'll take some transaction cycles to go through. It'll take some development of some your team playing together and some chemistry and learning some habits. It's fair to evaluate whether you need to make a coaching change like the Cavs did. It's all part of the all-in perspective. I'm sure you could tell me if you want to tell Knicks fans, the all-in nature of after the Harden trade, your perspective changes. How you approach regular season wins and losses change.
Oh,
and
yeah.
What patience would you preach to Knicks fans that might think the sky is falling after a regular season loss?
Oh man, preaching patience to Knicks fans is a very difficult task.
I know there's a lot of therapy that's required for it, but if you want to try,
just take solace in the fact that you are where you're at. I'll switch it over. I'm a New York Giants fan. They are just the biggest pile of utter trash right now. And they had that one really good random season. I'm calling it random now because they've stunk right now. And I was never a Daniel Jones believer. I did not think that team was winning the Super Bowl even when they made it through that first playoff game. But everyone who told me this is a joke, this is I was you're absolutely right, but I'm just going to enjoy it. What the Knicks are doing is way better than that. And they struggled for years in the past too. So enjoy being relevant. It's harder, it's saying, being relevant, that sounds kind of like the basis, but it's really not. You're the New York Knicks. People are coming to your games. Everyone's talking about you. You're in a good spot. I think, we were talking about the front office. I think Leon Rose has, with the exception of the Mikal Bridges trade, has won every deal he's done in the past 2 years. I think, trading Julius Randle an expiring contract and selling high on Devo for what is going to be a Hall of Fame center, you smashed it out of the park. You're in a good position. just be aware of where you are, I guess, is how I wrap it all up.
Did you specifically say except for the Mikal Bridges trade because you think the Nets won it, or do you think the jury's still out?
I think when you look at the trade itself, yeah, I would say that. I think that anyone, looks at that and says 5, maybe 6 first round picks for a guy who's never been an all-star, that's unprecedented. Now you can make the argument that, and this is what I've heard a lot, if the Knicks go on to win a championship, then they win the trade. And I think that would be good. But I do think if the Knicks win a trade, it will be because they flip Julius Randle and Devo for a Hall of Fame center. And Jalen Brunson did something totally unprecedented and didn't take a lot of money so that they could build out the team better. It won't be because they traded 6 first rounders for Mikal Bridges. If that makes sense.
I think if they win a title, they can't lose the trade. I'm not going to say that they can't, like the Nets can't also win the trade. Like that, I like win-win trades. I do agree. Listen, it took like maybe an hour after they actually traded for Mikal Bridges for me to go, damn, that's a lot of picks. Like it did take a while for me to actually look at the pick package and come down from the power that I was on.
Yeah, I'll also add if the Nets draft like 5. I can't think of who's. I'm thinking of the bust that they drafted in Cleveland. That if they draft 5 or 6 busts, then obviously they lose the trade.
The Anthony Bennett. Yeah.
Anthony Bennett. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that happens, then, but it's when you decide who won and lost, you're gauging probabilities for all 6 things. I think odds are one or they will get the value back they gave up for Mikal Bridges with 6 swings at a first round pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Very technical correction, but where's the 6th pick? Is it the swap you're talking about?
You know what? It's another one where it is so far in front. It's
for their own. It's for their own, and then the Milwaukee pick.
I think there's one where it might turn into like 2 seconds if it doesn't fall some way. I said 5 or 6 a couple.
So that's I think the Milwaukee pick that if it doesn't convert, it becomes 2 seconds. But it's going to convert this year. I don't know. I think it's
5 strings. I still stand by my point.
I agree with the actual evaluation of it. Then I think everybody outside of Manhattan would also agree with the evaluation. I think I just keep going back to what you said. Like banners fly forever. Like if the Knicks win a title,
it'll mean
like I'm okay with them losing it if they win the if the Nets get a dynasty out of it. I will still be like, yeah, but the Knicks won the whatever 2025 26 title.
That's the great thing about sports, and I would never try to gauge the heartbeat of another like fan when that banner's going up. That's something only you'll have that forever, and that's something that is something you can't say, oh, this is X amount of picks value. You know what I mean? So that's a valid point as well. I hear you.
But last question, I promise. Is it weird that this is like, because you said you live with 4 Knicks fans, that like you had the Rockets connection because of the Harden trade, and like obviously the Celtics connection from years ago, but there are miles between you and any Celtics fan or any Rockets fan. Like you got to go on the internet to find the connection there. The fact that this connection exists, like there's a Knicks Nets connection from a transaction. It's oddly like, I'm sorry, Yankee fans, that I'm going to bring it up, but like Juan Soto means something to like Yankee fans have a reason to hate watch the Mets even more so for the next 15 years. And the fact that the Nets future and who won a trade is with the Knicks is like, how does that feel? Like, did you ever think that we'd actually be here, that for at least the next 5-8 years, it's going to be like, oh yeah, we're still evaluating who won the Mikal Bridges trade?
Yeah, no, I didn't, because at the time, because you brought it up, they haven't traded together forever and ever. So it did not seem something that because the Knicks fans were constantly saying we got to trade for Mikal. I constantly was like, I'll believe it when I see it, just because of that fact. But I'm kind of glad that we have that, because I feel like the NBA doesn't have a whole lot of like true rivalries. I think the Knicks and the Nets, especially because the Nets just came to New York 12, or I think we're on year 12 now. Yeah. It's kind of like it's like a joke rivalry. Like the teams have never been good at the same time. Like it's actually hilarious how they just seem to trade which one is going to be good. So I think that's something there where like maybe we can all get some fun out of this, So I'm here for it.
They only made the playoffs together 3 times, right? That first year when they went to Brooklyn, and then oddly enough, when the Knicks were supposed to be awful, that first year post-pandemic, the 72 game season.
Right. Yeah.
And then the year they, I guess they made it the year that they traded Katie and Kyrie and Mikal Bridges, and they got swept by the Sixers.
Yeah, they were
that is technically
within the door.
Right. They were on there.
It was all because of the wins they had when Katie and Kyrie were there.
Exactly. This is year one of a long stretch of us evaluating and checking in on the status. Listen, I did this with Dallas fans for years. Like, all right, let's see who won the Porzingis trade as of now. The irony is that because of the Porzingis trade, they extended Porzingis, then didn't have the money to pay for Jalen Brunson. And guess where he ended up? We'll see what happens. Collin, I enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming to the Knicks Film School Podcast. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and the Brooklyn.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed the conversation very much too. I'm at just Collin Helwig on Twitter. 2 L's in Collin, 1 in Helwig. Check us out at the Brooklyn Pod. We talk Nets, we talk Brooklyn culture, NBA basketball, talk a lot of the teams that the Nets are attached to picks because, our team ain't doing too hot right now. So check us out over there. It's just the Brooklyn Pod on TikTok. Yeah, TikTok's back. So on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and we're on YouTube too. So come check us out.
And I think I speak for you and myself and a lot of New Yorkers when I say go Commanders.
I'm from Pennsylvania, dude. No one hates Philly. I'm a New York fan from Pennsylvania. No one hates Philly more than the guy you're looking at right now.
I would argue that it's equal as somebody who hates Philly, as a Mets fan who enjoyed very much that in a 4-month span, New York ended both the basketball and baseball seasons in Philadelphia, which is why we need the Commanders to end this Eagles thing so I don't have to hear about, and I'm sure you equally as much don't want to hear about Saquon and this whole thing continuing.
He is another guy. He is another guy from my hometown too, Saquon Barkley. So that's a whole nother layer I got to deal with.
Jeez.
Sorry to cut you off.
So you were a Giants fan rooting for Saquon, and then the season happened, unfortunately.
Yeah. Nothing makes sense in my life.
Gotcha. Well, this isn't a comfort at all because the Giants are still in the shape that they're in, but you could be the Jets. Not that that's a comfort.
Would you rather be a pile of trash on the street, or would you rather be a pile of rats on the street?
You know what? Fair question. Fair question, Collin. Thank you so much, Collin, for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Pod. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Pod. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes and drop a 5-star rating and a review. I will be back on Saturday because that's the next time the Knicks have a game against the Sacramento Kings. We'll be doing a pregame pod live on Saturday around noon. So pay attention to set your notifications, subscribe to the channel, set notifications so you can be alerted when we go live. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.